by, helping protect your client relationships and with your own, patrons, and just opening doors for, deeper engagement within your business. So at the end of the day, our goal is to really make running a business easier and more efficient. And so business owners can get out of the weeds and back to, leading their industry with confidence.
Yeah. And so you said some really good points. And touching back on what is the difference between and why do some business owners I'm sorry, let me step back. Why should business owners really think about that switch between a 1099 and a W-2? I'm going to put something on the screen really quickly. What are the benefits to a business owner in terms of compliance of turning their employees into W-2s and not leaving them as 1099s? We understand, right, that, not having to pay taxes on an employee is beneficial because you think you're saving money, but are you really saving money in the long term? And whoever wants to answer that.
Yeah, I'll take this one on. So I think it's always scary, right? Like you're a new business owner, you're maybe stepping into a role where you're like, what is payroll? What are payroll taxes? Yes, I've been paid as a W-2, but I have no idea, what money they took out and where it went. Maybe you're hiring on some people and yeah, it sounds great. Maybe not taking out the taxes. However, if you're the business and your name's on the business, it's your EIN, you're the one who's responsible if something goes wrong, right? And what happens a lot of times is, we have this thing called unemployment. I know during COVID, right? Like so many people went and filed unemployment because they weren't working and they got a lot of money from the government. If you've been paying an employee and you've been paying them as a 1099 and you've just been giving them money and they go to file unemployment and the IRS finds out, hey, why is this person filing for unemployment? We didn't even know they worked for this business. The IRS is going to come back to you and say, hey, like, we didn't see any taxes being paid for this employee. Not only are you going to have to pay the taxes, you're going to have to pay a late fee and interest on it as well. So kind of going back towards, what is a 1099 versus a W-2? A 1099 is going to be someone who works for you on a contractual basis. What that means is if you have someone that comes in monthly and like cleans your house, or you hire someone to do a project and you're going to pay them, $500, $2,000 to do that project, but they're not working on like an hourly cadence, that would be a 1099. If you have someone coming in, weekly, on an hourly schedule, they have a schedule, that is technically a W-2 employee. And like I mentioned before, the IRS is not really someone you want to mess with because in turn, they probably will find out and then you will have to pay those fees with, additional interest on top and a late fee. So it's not fun and it's detrimental for a business. And since your name is on it, like you just want to make sure that, you're doing everything to keep operations going and, to in turn grow your business and not necessarily set yourself up for failure. And I know it's scary and I know like paying a W-2 employee is scary, but, you take the risk of running a business. You want to make sure that, everything that you're doing, all the work that you're doing is going to pay off long term. And no one likes to pay taxes. We get it.
No.
We know we're not trying to be the barrier of bad news, but we do want to make sure that, you are doing things correctly. And, if you have any questions and if you have any one-offs, like Natalie and I are always open ears and always able to talk to you about it. And, have a little bit more in-depth conversations. If, you don't know if someone's a W-2 or 1099, we're more than happy to walk you through with that. And not to say ADP can't pay 1099s. We do have the capabilities of paying 1099s and paying contractors through direct deposit with our software, which is amazing. So, we're not biased to either, if you have a bunch of 1099s working for you, we're also happy to help out. But it is important that, you make sure you're doing things, compliantly. So.
Yes. So I love what you touched on also during the pandemic, as a matter of fact. Those businesses, and I saw it because I got phone calls and I got, people reaching out. They missed out on money they missed out on money because they were paying most of their employees as 1099s, and they missed out on those PPP loans and a lot of other things. So when you're anticipating things like this happening too, who was going to anticipate a pandemic? Nobody, right? But it not only it is, you're becoming more compliant and making sure that your business structure is correct. There's also some nuances with W-2s too, versus 1099s in terms of the fees and in terms of compliance and overtime and this and that. And so making sure that you do classify your employees properly is really beneficial. So thank you for mentioning all that, and especially the tools that you guys have too, which really makes it streamlined. I know for us, speaking personally, making sure that all of our employees are classified properly, and even just the difference between the full-time and the part-time, right? A lot of business owners also have full-time employees and part-time employees, and you don't have to think. I understand that some business owners will do this manually, because I've seen it. They do all of their payroll on their own. And I'm like, whoa, that is taxing, right? Because now you have to figure out, and you might not even have a bookkeeper. You might not even have an accountant, and you're trying to do this on your own. You're having to figure out how much taxes for a full-time employee, how much taxes for a part-time employee do I have to pay? And the fact that you all have that all streamlined is really beneficial. So let's talk about some other pitfalls that you guys, or pain points that you all see in small business owners, that you all deal with on pretty much on a daily basis. What other things? I mean, we talked about overlooking, some state specific laws, or just the record keeping. Touch on some of those if you can.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, talking on overlooking state-specific payroll laws is a big thing. Every state, and sometimes even cities, have their own payroll rules. It includes things like minimum wage, paid time off or sick leave, requirements with taking breaks, and how final paychecks must be handled. For example, if your business operates in more than one city or state, it can be a challenge to keep up. You have to make sure that it's all being filed with every single state that your employees work in. And so with ADP, our platform really helps automatically apply for those, local regulations when you run payroll, and sends you, alerts when laws change. So these are all, like we mentioned, those small, tiny things that, maybe people don't think about. Say your restaurant operates, or your business operates in a small state, and employees drive in from the state underneath to come to work. You might not even, think about, hey, I'm registered for, my unemployment tax services in this state. However, I also need to be registered in that one. So these are those little small things that slip through the cracks, that really, make it, it can really take a toll in the future, and really, rack up those costs that you might not want to think about, as you're trying to continuously grow, your culinary business. Time labor costs are a very big thing as well. Not keeping track of how many hours your employees work can really be, detrimental in the future. Having time clock keeping systems to ensure that your employees are coming in on time, and, keeping up with overtime is also a very big thing that we can help solve. So, when you're creating your business, it's those little things that really do fall through the cracks that we're able to catch for you.
Nice. And I like, go ahead, Jane. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback, a little bit off what Natalie mentioned about, the cost of time labor. She mentioned, making sure that you have something in place to figure out, when your employees are coming in and when they're leaving. That can add up. It's crazy, how often we have employees that leave 5 minutes early. They show up 5 minutes late. That's 10 minutes a day. if they're working 5 times a week, it's about an hour a week. And then you add that per month, that's, 4 hours a month.
Right.
That'll, be costly for a business, where
Right.
we've actually found out that like putting a timekeeping software in place that holds people accountable for clocking out for lunch, like what Natalie mentioned, making sure that they either show up on time or that they're not getting paid for the time that they're not there, is really important. And I think it relates a lot to the restaurant industry, just because, there are so many moving parts. You guys have your hands full and arms pulled in so many different directions that you don't want to make sure that you're just saying, hey, they're scheduled for 9 hours a day, and then they only worked 8. That's costly for your business. So it's super important that, you think about those things. And we see that putting a timekeeping software in place is a big time and money saver for y'all as well.